I just have to figure out where the unmute button was. Test 1, 2, 3.
That's great. We can hear you great. And you can hear us, I assume.
Okay, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Down to one. Hi. So Councillor Proctor and Director Herrick both been able to log in. We can hear them fine. Are you going to try logging in again? Yeah, because it was a different system, right? So it's a different connection from the first meeting to the second meeting, which you're going in on the second one. Okay, bye. Oh, Brian's just texting. Is everything okay?
Hi, can you hear us? Can you do a sound check? That's Director Campbell. Yeah.
I can hear you. Trudy, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm calling this meeting back to order. First, again, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territories of the Sinawawas First Nations. Next on our agenda is item 7. So this is our consent agenda. So I'll just simply make the motion that or actually before I do that, is there any items that are being removed from the consent agenda this evening? Okay, hearing or seeing none, I will move to making the motion that the recommendations listed for items 7A through 7D in the consent agenda be approved. Second by Councillor Kesselbreck. We'll call a question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to our public input period. So again, persons recognized by the chair to speak must first state their name and address for the record, may speak once for up to 2 minutes unless council resolves otherwise, or are limited to providing comment regarding items listed on the consent or on the council agenda for this evening. Comments must be directed to the chair, must not be directed to individual council members, staff, or the audience, and must not include personnel issues. And just keeping in mind, we did adopt the agenda as amended earlier this evening, and we excluded 9E from the agenda. So, are there any members of the gallery wishing to speak this evening? No. I believe that would be okay. It's a development permit. Yeah. So, okay. So go ahead, and again, just name and address for the record, please. Gotta press the little button so it turns red.
Okay, I'm Dustin Hilderly. I live at 7355.
You're gonna really have to lean into that and yeah, it'll be uncomfortable.
All right, thank you. Clarification. Dustin Hilderly. I live at 7355 Venture Road in Lantzville. So we want to build an accessory building carriage house on the back portion of our property at 7355 Venture Road. The proposed building will have a garage, a suite, and a pottery studio in it. Based on the R1 zoning, we could build the garage and the pottery studio on the ground floor with the suite above and be allowed a 7-meter height. I'm sure you guys all know this, familiar with the bylaws. But the intent is to have the suite on ground level and the pottery studio on the upper floor, meaning it's being interpreted as a carriage house without garage below, and the maximum height is 6 meters. So we're requesting a variance of 1 meter So from the 6 meters to 7 meters to allow the suite to be built at ground level with the pottery studio above. The suite's intended to incorporate aging in place, and building the suite on the ground floor will support good practice for accessible housing. And that's basically all. So appreciate your time and consideration, and I'll happily answer any questions if you have them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any additional speakers? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on in our agenda. So we're under 9 of our agenda. So first one is the development variance permit application for 7355 Venture Road. There's a motion there. Councillor Gusbrecht, go ahead.
Yes, that the development variance permit number DVP 22-4 for 7355 Venture Road be issued.
And do we have a seconder to that? Second by Councillor Proctor. Discussion. So go to
Thank you.
Councillor Gusbrecht.
I've read the staff report, well-written as usual, pointed out that we have a little quiddity in our in our zoning bylaw that depending if you put the carriage house above the garage is different than beside it. I don't think it makes a difference. As in other development permit applications, staff sends a flyer out to your neighbors. It looks like there's unanimous consent from your neighbors. In fact, Mr. Bibbs wrote a letter, and looks like he's quite into your building over there. And it looks like you only need a couple inches, but I have no problem allowing this. It's more building, and when I hear about aging in place, I'm getting into that demographic. So yeah, I'm in favor of that, and good on you. Thank you.
Okay, through the seconder if you wish, and then I'll move to the rest of the council.
I read the application, I read the staff report, I read all the letters provided by the neighbors, and I wholeheartedly support this variance permit. I think it's really worthwhile to have aging in place in our community.
Okay, additional speakers on this item. So Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I have no problem with the building at all. It's just that there's this variance ties in with the whole package. It's all really one and the same. And I always like helping people as much as one can as individuals. And it's my job as a counselor to look at long-term issues. So I just wanted to bring this up, but this application shows, just on one map, it wasn't mentioned, that the only access to this proposed carriage home is this approximate 18-foot wide strip of public land. So once this application is approved, this strip of public land will forever be for vehicles.
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Councillor Proctor?
I don't think that discussing a dedicated road right away has anything to do with this item on the agenda and the variance permit.
So through to Councillor Savage. Councillor Proctor is correct in the sense that we're not here to discuss the road in behind. I don't know if there's a way that you can rephrase.
Yes, well, I think it's quite straightforward. If we were voting on a variance of a store and provincial legislation stated it was not legal or it would contravene the community charter, we'd have no problem bringing that up, even though the topic was the variance.
Point of order.
Point of
How
order.
does this contravene the community charter? How does a variance permit contravene the community charter? We're not discussing the item.
Okay, Councillor Proctor, you
discussing-
stated your point of order. So, again, I don't know if it's necessarily a point of order, but with respect to the questioning, Councillor Savage, if we can, again, with respect to the development's variant permit, we're talking about increasing the height of the dwelling from 6 meters to 7 meters. That's really what's being asked here.
Yes,
There's
but
a
if,
concern about the access to the back. I think that would be a fair question. Again, we can't stray too far from what's being asked.
it's just the access is the whole ballgame with the variance. So There's no variance, there's no application without the access. So my point being that I think it's important we get this information before we move forward. That doesn't mean we can't accommodate the application. It means that there's some very important issues that have to be solved. And one is, are there historical documents showing that this was authorized as a vehicle right-of-way? Because, as I say, if it's 18 feet wide, and so here is what it looks like, somewhat in scale. This is the lane here. This is a deep, wide gully that accommodates the creek. And this is Sebastian Road, where it widens to about 35 feet. So if this was ever authorized as a vehicle right-of-way, it seems very peculiar to me that it ever would be, because of the very narrow nature here, and the gully is inaccessible by vehicles, and why it would suddenly increase in size there. So
Councillor Savage, with all due respect, I'm going to just cut you off there, and I'm going to move it through to staff just to provide comment about access. Again, we're really here to be, discussing the development variance permit, which has to do with height. I understand your concerns about the access and what this decision would do to impact the lane access. In fact, whether or not it's even an approved lane, I don't know. But I think they're valid questions. But I'll let Director Lim Shu comment as much as he can on this particular issue.
Your Worship, through the council, the lane in question is effectively a dedicated road right-of-way. It's no different than any other dedicated road that we have in the District of Lantzville. The only difference is that it's not been improved to it's not paved like you would see in other roads. The property owners that are immediately adjacent to that lane or right-of-way has the ability to access or gain access from that right-of-way. I mean, I think the issue is really around safety. If you look on the diagram or the site plan on page 28, you'll see that the lane itself will only service 4 lots maximum. And I do believe that the larger property to the south has been utilizing that laneway for access to their property since the parcel was created, at least since the house on the property has been created. And so historically, there's been use of the lane for vehicular access. This is not something new. I think from staff's perspective, it's fine to utilize that laneway for access to the back of the property.
And as a follow-up through chair to staff, please.
Go ahead, Councillor Savage, and then we have Councillor Proctor and then Councillor Gutsberg.
What improvements will the district be responsible for with this lane? Because there's liability issues if someone's walking along there, whereas the set pedestrian walkway versus the actual road, has it been surveyed to ensure it doesn't encroach on the Halsall property? What are the setback requirements from the top of the bank? It ends at the top of the bank and there's only a fence there. I would think that would require a proper indication for cars that's the end of the road. It's usually standard. There's a reflective sign or a cement barrier.
Okay, so Councillor Savage, let's let Director Lim Shu answer the question, and then.
Well, I'd like to call a point of order first.
What's your point of order?
Whether there's a fence, whether there's
That's
liability.
not a point of order, Councillor Gutsberg.
I'm getting to it. That this roadway has nothing to do with this development permit application, and I object to any questions and any further discussion. I'd like a ruling on that.
I think I've made a ruling already on that, and I've permitted Councillor Savage to ask questions with a limited scope.
I hear Councillor Savage going on about the roadway, not the development
Okay, so
permit.
I'm not going to debate this back and forth, Councillor Gutsberg. I did make a ruling on it to permit some questions about the access. I'm trying to allow Director Lim Shu to respond to Councillor Savage's question. And if I'm, just to reiterate, it has to do with, I believe, the surveying, and do we know, in fact, the confounds of the road right away? Because, granting this development permit does have some implications around the use of that laneway, and I think the questions are somewhat valid. As long as we're not going down too many rabbit holes with this stuff, I think it's fair to ask.
Your worship, through the council, with respect to the liability, it's no different than any other road dedication that we have within the district of Lantzville. I mean, we have responsibility to make sure that there's safe access to and use of those road rights of ways. The fact of the matter is, the property owner could simply build a garage tomorrow, and this would not be in front of council for consideration. So I think, the chicken's out of the barn, so to speak, and that, there's certainly demonstrated proof from the folks that live in that area that they've been using it for vehicular access for a long period of time. This is not something new. And to council's point, the application is really dealing about the height of the building and not the condition or the use of the road right-of-way. Should this be an issue for council? Certainly, I believe that it'd be appropriate for council to perhaps discuss it as a separate item. But for the purpose of this application, I think the focus is really about the building height.
Okay, so thank you. And I was going to speak to this next, and then we'll go around the horn because we do have second-time speakers. So, for myself, it's if anything, it's just really about and again, I totally understand what's being asked here. It's the additional meter. I have no issue with that whatsoever. It's good application. With respect to, does this trigger things down the road for us? It doesn't sound like it, but it would be nice to probably formalize the use of that lane. Like, I don't even know if it has a name, but the only one I'm familiar with in Lantzville is Lucas Lane, and that's kind of a crappy alley at the best of times. But no disrespect to the people who have that as their address, but that's what it is. So in terms of just formalizing it and making sure that it's properly marked, I think that probably would need to be done at some point down the road. But anyways, based on the application in front of us, yes, I do support it. So Councillor Proctor and then Councillor Gusterbrack. And Councillor Proctor, you're muted.
Am I muted now?
No, we can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. I fully support this application, and so do all the neighbors. And I have heard no concerns about this laneway that's existed for and been used for a length of time by people in that neighborhood. So I question why anybody would bring that up. But I do have a quick question through to staff. If we were to take this laneway away, would we be in a legalist? Aren't we taking the rights away from the property owners that have been using this lane for a number of years? Wouldn't we be liable for legal action?
Your worship, through council, I would expect that the property owners that are utilizing that laneway would be quite upset with them losing their access to their properties, and certainly it'll be up to them to decide whether or not they want to take legal action against council, or sorry, the district.
And rightly so. And actually, if I was a property owner that backed on that laneway, even somebody suggesting that would get me up, my shackles up. I fully support this application.
Okay, Councillor Gusterbrack.
Yeah, I have to disagree with the earlier characterization. I heard that this was, I forget the exact word, but not up to snuff laneway. I distinctly recall on the discussions regarding Sebastian Road that certain residents love to walk down sandy lanes barefoot and have the sand beneath their feet and keep it semi-rural and have it real country-like. So I think those people would strongly object to take away this lovely little lane. I heard that certain of the residents had been canvassed by one of our counselors over the last day or so. So I took the opportunity of going down there, and it's a lovely little laneway. It's all treed, and I walked in. Of course, it can't go all the way through to Sebastian because there's a canyon there. Well, maybe I hyperbolize a bit, but there's a waterway that goes through. So it's never going to go through. It's lovely. Let's put it on the tourist map here in Lantzville. Come down and visit. It's called The Lane. Is that what I understand?
No, it's not appropriate.
Well, it's-
So, Councillor Gusper, you shouldn't be conversing with the gallery, please.
Okay, well, maybe we could find out maybe we could name it and have it on our tourist map. But I diverge once again, and I'd like to get the question called on this so the good proponents can get home and get going on their carriage house.
Okay, so we're not going to do any back and forth. We're trying to avoid that. But for myself, again, fully support the project. In terms of the lane itself, like I said, having maybe something around it, I don't know, if it's starting to get more developed through there in terms of fire department and access and stuff like that, it's something we should be considering. But other than that, it is a road right away. It's intended for access, so that would be the way I interpret it, and that's that. So, Councillor Savage, and then I'm going to call the question.
Yes, just two questions. First of all, could you answer, please, Director Limshu, my previous question, what is the setback requirement from the top of the bank there from the creek?
Within our zoning bylaw, the setback is 15 meters from the top of bank of a watercourse.
And this would apply to the lane and vehicle parking and so on?
Point of order.
And what's your point of order, Councillor Proctor?
This doesn't have anything to do with the variance permit. I think we need to bring up the laneway separately if somebody has some
Okay, so
suggestions. on
point of
that.
order is noted. So, again, Councillor Savage, I think these questions you could probably email in through to
Yeah,
staff.
I'd already asked the question before, though, so.
Okay, so is there anything further?
Last one, please, is the former planner told me that a designated vehicle right-of-way is quite difficult to turn into parkland. Is that correct?
Again, I think through to staff, don't answer. I think these are questions that can be sent in by email. I think
All right,
the
I'll bring
question
it up
is-
separately in
we
a,
suggested be called. I think there has been
I'll bring
very
it up
sufficient
separately in a
debate.
motion next week. And just to finish off, with apologies to the owners of the property, but this is very important because it's once it's authorized, dedicated, formalized as a road right-of-way where I haven't seen the documents.
So,
this
Councillor
has
Savage,
great
I'm going to
Point of
stop you
order.
there. Sorry, Councillor Proctor, I'm in the middle of speaking. So, Councillor Savage, again, we're not going to be talking about the road right away anymore. I think staff has more than answered enough questions about that. And again, any further questions council has about any use of the road right away, please email them into staff. Unless there's anything, sorry, any point of order, Councillor Proctor, since you have called that.
No, you dealt with it. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to move to call in question. All those in favor and opposed, and that's carried unanimously. All right, so that takes us on, where are we here? Bylaw number 298. So this is the District of Lantzville zoning bylaw. So is someone prepared to make that motion? So move it, go ahead and you can make the motion, Councillor Gusbrock.
That the District of Lantzville zoning bylaw number 180, 2020, amendment brackets miscellaneous, bylaw number 298, 2021 be adopted.
Okay, and do we have a seconder to that? Second by Councillor Wilson. I'm just going to move to call in the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Or is that opposed? Councillor? Okay, and noting that Councillor Savage is opposed, that's carried. That takes us on to bylaw number
As a
320.
point of order, please.
And what's your point of order?
I'll be declaring conflict on this item. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, state and
Due to
general
my
reasons why-
proximity, due to the proximity of my property to this one, thank you.
So I'll just let Councillor Savage a moment to leave the meeting, noting the time is 7:07. Okay, someone prepared to make the motion for bylaw number 320. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
The District of Lantzville Phase 3 Sanitary Sewer Collection System Local Area Service Establishment Bylaw number 143, 2017, comma, amendment in brackets enlarged boundary, end bracket, bylaw number 320, comma, 2022 be given first, second, and third readings.
Okay, and we have a second by Councillor Gusselbreck. Discussion,
Nothing from me to
and
add.
through to the seconder. Nothing, Councillor Gusselbreck. Okay, and through the rest of the council, so Councillor Proctor and I, anything? I have nothing. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, I'm going to move to calling the question. Then all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. If someone can please get Councillor Savage back. All right, noting the time is 7:09. Councillor Savage is rejoining the meeting. Now we're on to bylaw number 321. Someone prepared to make that motion? Okay, Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
The District of Lantzville 2023 Property Tax Exemption Bylaw number 321, comma, 2022 be given first, second, and third readings.
And second by Councillor Gusselbreck. Discussion. Through to the mover.
Nothing to add.
Okay, and then to the seconder.
Yes, a question through to staff. I'm looking, where are we, page 52. One of the exempt parties, I thought I saw the ICF. And we seem to vote on this, we have to vote on this every year, and I see the usual. Under B on page 53, Island Corridor Foundation. Could staff comment on that? Is that a new item that's been added to our exempt list?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Gesselbreck. It's not a new item. In the past, they were awarded a 10-year permissive tax exemption. That's the maximum amount of time you can provide a tax exemption for. So last year when we did the permissive tax exemption bylaw, because we have so few properties, I thought it was prudent to include it in the 10-year permissive tax exemption expired. And so we've added it to just keeping one bylaw for permissive tax exemption so you can see them all together rather than having two separate bylaws. So you were probably not used to seeing it in the past. Last year was the first year you saw it. So it basically will appear on the permissive tax exemption bylaw with the others going forward.
My only comment is I know that we are developing a closer relationship with the Sinawas First Nation. And I know that they like to be made aware of things that might affect them. And I'm cognizant that the ICF, one of the stakeholders is the Sinawas First Nation. So I wonder, has this item been brought up to their attention for comment or consultation?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Gesselbreck, it wasn't specifically brought up with the Sinawa First Nation, but it has been advertised in the newspaper. So for the public to be aware that council was going to be considering permissive tax exemption for these properties.
Follow-up, is there any time limit on us passing this tax exemption this evening?
Yes, there is. We have to provide BC assessment with a copy of our bylaw by the end of October.
By the end of October.
By the end of October. So it is time sensitive in that you are giving it first 3 readings at this meeting, which means you'll be adopting it at the next meeting. As such, the permissive tax exemption information will be forwarded to, the bylaw will be forwarded to BC assessment so that it can be applied to the subsequent property taxation roll.
I'm not authorized in any way whatsoever to speak on behalf of the Sonawas First Nation. And I don't know if this tax exemption would be a positive thing in their realm or a negative thing. I just think that with the task that we have for reconciliation in this country, that we have a positive duty to do a bit more than just putting something in the newspaper, which doesn't come out that often. I would, and I'll wait to hear from any other councillors on this, but I would really be hesitant to pass this tonight without direct communication with our brothers there at Sonawas, and if they have any thoughts or recommendations with respect to that.
If I can just add a comment to that, I believe there is an agreement in place between the District of Lantzville and the Island Corridor Foundation that we will be providing them permissive tax exemptions till 2035.
And that's with your permission, Chair. That is an agreement that we've had all along.
Yes, Your Worship. Yes.
Okay. All right. Then,
yeah, that kind of leads me into my question, which was basically if the District of Lantzville was to not grant this permissive tax exemption, what would be the consequences of that with ICF? My understanding is we wouldn't be able to use the trail lands anymore. We wouldn't have access through those various points, so through the Director Coates.
In fact, the requirement under the agreement is that the District of Lantzville pays for their taxes. So instead of doing it through a tax exemption bylaw, then we would be paying for it.
Okay. And I do understand and hear Councillor Gesselbrecht's concerns about having a good relationship with our First Nations chief and council. So it's but this is just one of these items that we really don't have much choice with, and that's always been my understanding. Through to the rest of council, Councillor Savage, and then okay.
Yes, through chair to staff, could you please tell us what the exemption rate is for the Legion? It used to be 50% many years ago. Is it 100% or 50%?
I believe it is 100%. They received full exemption.
Okay, so you're fairly certain of that, are you?
Yes, they're being exempt from property tax. We haven't applied a percentage on to the reduction.
Okay, that's great. Just wanted to ensure that. Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments for staff? Okay, hearing or seeing none, I will move to calling the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Okay. Almost thought I lost my agenda, but I've covered it. So now we're on to 10A. So this is the 2023 council meeting schedule. Is someone prepared to make that motion? Okay, I'll just simply make it then that this 2023 council meeting schedule be approved as attached to the September 7th, 2022 staff report, and further that staff be authorized to publish notice of availability of the schedule. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Savage. Discussion. Hearing or seeing none, I will move to calling the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, so that takes us on to the next item, which is 10B, which is in relation to,
As a point of order, please.
yeah, state your point of order.
I'll be declaring conflict on this item due to the proximity of my property to it. Thank you.
Okay, so noting the time is 7:17, Councillor Savage is leaving the meeting. Okay, so I'll just make the motion. So this has to do with the 6701 and 6717 Hardwood Developments Parkland. That council supports obtaining lands for park rather than cash in lieu for the proposed developments at 6701 Hardwood Drive and 6717 Hardwood Drive as identified in the respective staff reports. Open bracket, June 22nd, 2022, agenda, close bracket. Is there a seconder to this? Okay, so so seconded by Councillor Wilson. Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. It's just a motion directing staff that when it comes time for subdivision, that we take the quarter acre buffers at the end of each of those lots on Hardwood. As that was indicated in the staff report, there's nothing, we don't have a 219 covenant registered or anything. But again, it would provide for that transition going from the subdivision into the estate residential in that area. So to me, it's pretty straightforward. It just gives staff that direction because there's nothing registered on title to give that direction. So it's more of a housekeeping issue, if anything, as far as I'm concerned. Through to the seconder, Councillor Wilson, and then to the rest of the council.
Nothing to add. So your sort of thought here would be that it would be lands for park, like undeveloped park. Is that your idea? Or is it like something that we would be wanting developed into more park in Lantzville?
No, this would be strictly to be as a buffer, and that was indicated in the staff report. So this just guarantees that there's, there's no guarantees, but when it goes through to the subdivision process, it just informs that process that there is that quarter acre buffer at the end of each of those 5 acre parcels as it transitions into the state residential. So it's not intended to put tot lots or anything like on that. It would just be treed buffer and known as park. So,
all right, okay, I can support that.
Councillor Proctor and then Councillor Gesselbrack.
Thank you. So through you to staff, it's my understanding that this is exactly what we approved when we passed this subdivision approval, rezoning, I'm sorry. So this is just sort of rubber stamping it and making it what we already decided a little firmer. Am I correct in that?
Your worship, through the council, that's correct. This just reconfirms what the applicants had proposed through the rezoning process.
Thank you.
And Councillor Gesselbrack.
Yes, at first blush, this looked like a reconsideration motion, but I understand it isn't. Through to staff, we've adopted these bylaw, the OCP and zoning amendments. Is that correct?
That's correct.
On both of these?
On both.
So, for example, as this property gets developed, is there any reason why let's say, at the end of one of these subdivisions there, at the end, public washrooms could be put in, a nice concrete structure, men and women, and maybe a bike wash and bike, no, I'm being serious. And bike parking, can that be done as well?
Your worship, through the council, the quick answer would be yes. The area that we're talking about for park would be dedicated to the District of Lantzville. And so the District of Lantzville will have to make a decision as to how those lands are treated ultimately, whether it's to remain as is or to be improved upon, whether it's for, like you say, a bike wash, washrooms, whatever. But just to be clear, the onus is will not be on the developer to provide those facilities. It'll be up to the District of Lantzville.
follow-up, because I note that Copley Park is within walking distance of this area. There's no washrooms in Copley Park. And we know that when there's no washrooms in park areas that folks tend to use the foliage for their washrooms. So that I understand clearly that this motion would not foreclose putting in, fulsome public washrooms or bike wash, because it's also the gateway to not only the woodlot, but it's going to be a gateway up to the foothills where a lot of hikers and bikers use. So, I mean, it seems like it'd be a great location to put those sort of facilities in there. So the question is simply, staff nor council would be foreclosed from putting in those facilities in the future?
Your worship, through the council, no, this motion does not prevent those opportunities from coming forward.
Thank you.
And I think the short answer is this would be just like Huddlestone Park at a much later date after Huddlestone Park was established. Washrooms went in, power went in. You can still make improvements, but it just guarantees that, more of a guarantee, because the zoning bylaw is silent on this. And so, if there's a change of planner down the road or staff down the road, and this historical knowledge could be lost or missed, but at least we have a motion tied to these two properties and directing that, and the staff report, that's why it's referenced there, that these lands be kept as a buffer and as park. But again, not for tot lots. I wouldn't support it if it was for a couple of tot lots, because, again, the intended use was buffer, and I think your idea, Councillor Gusbrecht, is great, that, potentially looking at further improvements, because there will be a parking lot on I don't know what side of that would be, but the east side of the road. I think that's right. Anyways, so it could lend itself quite nicely to that. So anyways, unless there's anything further, I will move to calling the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. If someone can get Councillor Savage, please. And noting the time is 7:25, Councillor Savage is rejoining the meeting. Now we're on to new business. So we have Mayor and Council verbal updates. So I guess we can start with Councillor Wilson.
I have nothing to add.
Councillor Gusselbrecht.
I'd like to reserve my comments till the end. Thank you.
Okay, and then we have Councillor Proctor.
I don't have a report.
Councillor Savage.
Yes, thank you. I just thought I'd give an update on our UBCM convention this year. And just to preface that, they really are what you make it to be. And I take them very seriously and have targets I want to accomplish and work very hard there. And it can be quite exhausting, all the networking and meeting new people, ministers, and so on, where you're at it all day, then dinner, often you're doing it, and then even after dinner, there's more events. So this time around, we met with Minister Cullen about the water grant, and thought a good presentation was made by Mayor Swain and Director Hare. So it looked somewhat promising for what he stated, Minister Cullen, and he also referred us to someone he works with to get help for anything, how we can improve the application. So I hope staff takes advantage of that. And then we also brought up the fire hall grant as well. I had a nice chat with the Premier Horgan as will be leaving us soon, so it was nice sort of looking back on things, and I did bring up Lantzville and encouraged him to keep an eye on it, that my hope is we become a leading community in green technology and the way we lay out our housing, and also that the Hecla Creek village I brought up, which has the potential for being a model village for the rest of BC. So that was good. And then I also met Minister Murray Rankin, who's got a number of portfolios, Attorney General, and another one plus housing. So it was good to make contact with him, because then in the future, you're free to contact them to get help with support on different issues. So that was good. An interesting one was we happened to be at our lunch was a representative of electric scooters, and he's looking for Nanaimo to become an anchor city for these. You have to have an anchor city in order to have them available in towns like ours. And it's simply you set up kiosks where you can pay a small amount to get one to travel around, and then you park it at the kiosk near your destination. So I thought it would be an interesting aspect to Lantzville if we had those around the village for visiting various beach road ends and so on. And I saw chatted with Minister Josie Osborne as well, and told her about Lantzville's hope for the future. And then another thing is when you chat with these councillors and mayors all over BC, you get ideas and solutions to potential problems we might have. So when they arise, you know who to phone and so on. And the mayor of Souk had an interesting building she's looking into with council, and that is, they call it an intergenerational seniors housing, where it's near the school, so they partner with the school so the kids after school can go and play board games with the seniors. So it's a system that a somewhat vicarious relationship where the kids have the fun after school and the seniors love the kids and so on. So that's something they're looking into as well. And with the housing prices that seem to be softening now, once again, I met a number of northern community representatives that told me about the low prices up there, and they're just dying for growth and for people moving in so they can support some of the things they want to do. And I think that's something that should be looked at more, is to get the government sponsoring some development up there, and so young people will have an opportunity to get started in a low housing market. So anyway, all in all, very, very worthwhile. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for that update. Stole a lot of my thunder, I suppose. I also attended UBCM, and it's an excellent event, as usual. And it's really is about the networking amongst elected officials and exchanging of ideas and all sorts of stuff. So as Councillor Savage indicated, we did meet with Minister Cullen. He's the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and we discussed the fire hall application as well as the Water to the Winds application. Got some information back about possible next steps. Also had additional, and also worth mentioning was who was also at the meeting. So we had already mentioned that Director Hare was there, but we also had MLA Adam Walker attend as well. So it's always nice to have the support of our local MLA at these sorts of meetings, because it gives us, he can help us with the application and requesting meetings and so on. So it's great to have someone that will potentially facilitate that, or his office will help facilitate the meetings that we may need down the road. And again, it's with grant applications, there's always lots of people asking for money, and there's only so much money to be handed out, but it really comes down to how strong of an application we can present, and hopefully that will be considered at some point in the future. So, but again, there's some work to be done on that, and hopefully we'll get that done sooner than later. In terms of some of the sessions, obviously there's a lot of focus on housing in British Columbia these days, but the general theme is it's about the supply and not just rampant supply of expensive housing. It's the right supply of housing. That seemed to be the common theme. So are we supplying the right supply for our seniors? Are we doing the right supply for young families? Are we taking advantage of grant programs that are available out there? Are we utilizing the services of BC Housing and those sorts of things, and trying to create the diverse housing that every community should have, provided it fits within the context of the other services your community has to offer. So obviously, cities have better transit systems, better access to services, usually shorter walking distances, everything's more compact, whereas obviously we're in a semi-rural community. Sure, there's urban parts, but we have a different scenario going on here. But again, like every municipality in British Columbia, we have to try and really focus on having the right supply of housing that fits our community and also allows for growth, because that seems to be the message out there. We got to allow for growth. I think Lantzville has done an excellent job of that. We already have a ton of housing on the books, so to speak. Between Clark Med, there's 250, there's the Foothills, over 800 units of potential housing there. We've got all sorts of other housing that's going in Lantzville. So when you compare that to our base of, say, 1,450 to 1,500 homes, Lantzville is going to be basically doubling in the next number of years without adding on any other development. So I think we're ticking the boxes, even though there was no development for a number of years. We're definitely catching up in a big kind of way. Other than that, just also acknowledge the commemorative service for Queen Elizabeth that occurred on Monday, and for those who attended, and also thank the Legion for their ongoing work and what they do. So that was great that they were able to hold that service here in Lantzville, as there are other services throughout the world. So something that we are doing on a global level. Other than that, don't really have any other updates for council, but I will pass it off to Councillor Gesselbrecht.
Yes, thank you. Because of the length of our previous agendas before the summer break, I haven't been able to report on my attendance at the RDN board meetings and the committees I'm on. We did have the summer break. Briefly, the Transit Select Committee, which is part of the RDN and deals with BC Transit, the report we received yesterday that there's improved ridership. We're coming back from COVID. The numbers are up. BC Transit and the RDN is happy about that. There's many improvements planned and being implemented to increase the frequency of trips up and down the island within Nanaimo, and increased routes basically from the north to VIU, and from the north to the hospital, and from the north end, which is Woodgrove, down to Southgate, but as well island transportation. We now have a number of trips a day from Nanaimo to Duncan. You can catch a bus in Duncan and take you into Victoria. There was some comment from members of the committee suggestions that they increase the frequency so that if you have a specialist appointment in Victoria, and we all know that all the specialists are in Victoria, they aren't here, you can catch a ride not too early in the morning, perhaps not before sunrise, and get down to Victoria, have your appointment, and get back here in Nanaimo. That's all positive news. and the RDN is working assiduously on behalf of the residents of this region. Another item that came up at the last board meeting, and I thought it was something that we should really do here in Lantzville, that they moved that staff provide a report for the recognition of service of the volunteer firefighters within the boundaries of the RDN. It was noted that volunteer forces like Nanoose actually put on the John Enos night. They invite other volunteer forces to come down and enjoy a steak and have some camaraderie. I'm sure that our volunteer have their own get-together, but I think it's important that this council and the next council consider a policy for some form of recognition. I don't think we do have a policy through the staff. And through the chair to staff, what is that policy named?
It's called the Lantzville Fire Rescue Department Recognition of Member Service. It was adopted in April 2005 and amended last June 2018.
And what does it provide?
It provides a procedure for an annual dinner, also providing a review of the list of members that are eligible for their long service award and make an application for those commendations through the provincial and federal systems, and scheduling and hosting a appreciation dinner. Certainly during COVID, I realized it was looked different. Also, so it talks about the dinner, and then it goes on that the following describes the form of recognition for each category of recipient. And so it talks about the years of service and what the gift is that they receive. There's a dollar value, there's a pin, appreciation, yeah.
Well, that's good, because I do recall we've given certain life awards, and it's always good to have the volunteers up here in the chambers every so often, just to let them know that we love them and they do a great job. What also came out was some recent fires in Area C, which is it's the largest electoral area in the district. And the electoral director for Area C complimented the fact that the Lantzville Fire Department weighs in on that and brought their people over and their tankers, and there's a lot of good cooperation within the RDN, which is good to know when you have a disaster happening. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, so that takes us on to item 13, introduction of late items. Any late items to be introduced? Okay, hearing and seeing none, that moves us on to notices of motion. Any notices of motion? And then we'll go on to public clarification. Persons recognized by the chair to speak must first state their name and address for the record, and the agenda item for which they are seeking clarification, excluding public hearing topics, and may speak once for up to 2 minutes to ask clarification questions. For example, how did the vote go? Any technicalities, request interpretation of abbreviations or jargon, etc. Is there any member, the singular member of our gallery, would you like to speak? And again, name and address for the record.
Hi, Brian Blood, 7075 Gillette Road. Item 9D, property tax exemptions. A tax exemption for one property amounts, it's not technically a tax increase for others, but it represents a need to tax others at a higher level. So it has to be done fairly. And I understand that the province pretty much tells you what to do on this score. Churches, for example, you have to give them a tax exemption whether you want to or not. The same would apply to mosques, gurdwaras, you name it. And I just want to go through my annual ritual of saying that I would like to hear someone from this council explain why it is a good idea for a church to get a
So,
tax
Mr. Blood,
exemption.
this is about just questions again.
Yeah, I'm asking a question.
Clarification. So is there a clarification about
Yeah,
a vote that occurred? It's not to get into a back and forth dialogue on
Fine.
specific
I'd
items.
like to hear someone explain why a church warrants
Okay, so
tax
that's
holiday.
noted. You're probably best just to email all of council if there's a specific question on
Okay,
that.
see you next year.
Okay, thank you. All right, so at this point, I'm gonna make a motion that we go back in camera to finish that portion of our agenda. So to close the meeting, and again, this would be the section, I don't know which ones we got left, but I'll just go through them all, 91A, 91E, F, I, J, 92B, and D. Is there a seconder to go back in camera? Second by Councillor Wilson. I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. So we're back in camera. If someone can just grab the door, please.
Are we just going to continue to use this live feed for in camera, or do I need to?
Yes, you can continue because there's no one, oh, wait. Just got to turn.